Dr. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to our honorable guests from the District of Columbia. Since 1888, there have been hundreds of bills and amendments proposed to address D.C. representation. Since 1964, Congress has held no less than 10 hearings on it. The House debated statehood in 1992. They heard from over a dozen witnesses and got another 20 opinions from every segment of the government. Witnesses identified numerous problems from constitutional to financial to administrative. The 1992 Minority Staff Report does an excellent job of laying all those issues out. Yet here we are again debating this issue, even though it has no chance of success in this chamber and is dead on arrival in the House and will not and cannot possibly be even considered before we go sine die. This bill makes a state out of the neutral land that houses the federal government. It's unprecedented. Little effort was made to hold a hearing that seriously debates this bill. More than half the witnesses are representatives from the District of Columbia in their elected capacities, all with the same agenda, voicing the same interests. They're legitimate. With the exception of a witness I invited, none of the witnesses here provide an alternative opinion. None. You can learn a lot about the seriousness of this hearing by looking at who is not here. Where's the Department of Justice? Every Department of Justice that has issued a report or testified about legislated D.C. statehood, Kennedy, Carter, Reagan, Bush, has concluded it is unconstitutional and would come with other extremely complex legal challenges. Where's the CBO, OMB, the Interior, Transportation, State, Defense, the General Services Administration, and the Treasury? D.C. statehood would significantly affect the federal government's operations, including use and access to water and sewer services, utilities, police, fire services, infrastructure, communications network, the D.C. National Guard, D.C.'s unfunded liabilities and other benefits, and ability to control the aesthetics and conditions of our nation's capital. D.C. statehood would also come at unknown cost to the United States. Who here is representing the interest of other states? D.C. statehood would significantly affect the sovereignty of other states, becoming the first among equals. Nothing in the bill prevents New Columbia from still getting the special funding D.C. gets, $674 million each year by virtue of being the nation's capital. D.C. residents got more than 8 times the national average of federal aid per capita and more than 2 times the next highest state. Who's here to represent Virginia and Maryland? There's a serious question as to whether Maryland's consent would be necessary to create a new state, since it gave the land to the capital. The bill even gives New Columbia control over certain land in Virginia and Maryland, a serious affront to their sovereignty. Federal workers, I'll pass on that. D.C. residents suffer an injustice, I agree, by not having a vote. But Congress cannot bypass the constitutional amendment process simply because it's inconvenient. The framers designed the district to be an autonomous federal area, separate from any state's influence and different from all other federal land. It is patently false to say the framers could not have predicted the city would thrive. The district was envisioned prior to 1800 as a large, powerful city with 800,000 people, more than D.C. has now, more than even Paris had at the time. President Kennedy's Attorney General said Congress can't reduce the district's size any more than it can remove a state from the Union. Attorney General Kennedy said a small enclave clearly does not meet the concept of the permanent seat of government which the framers held. President Reagan's Attorney General said he would recommend the President veto any bill providing statehood without a previous constitutional amendment. Lee Casey, who wrote that report, could not testify today, but sent a letter with an original copy and reiterating its findings. The last report on an administration has issued on this subject, and I'd ask unanimous consent that that be added to the record. This bill also largely ignores the 23rd Amendment, which recognized D.C. and gave its residents 3 electoral votes. Granting statehood without first repealing the 23rd Amendment creates a legal and political absurdity, allowing a few residents, including the White House occupants, to be the decisive votes in a close presidential contest. Howard Law Howard law professor Adam Kurland says as much in a law review article, and I'd like to ask that unanimous consent that be entered into the record. And then finally, George Washington law professor Jonathan Turley, who could not be here today to testify, but wrote an informative article about the political and constitutional implications of this bill. I'd like to have that admitted for the record. I'll close with a quote from one of our witnesses today. Alice Rivlin in 2009 said this: "I think statehood is so unlikely to happen in the foreseeable future that pursuing it is a serious distraction from more important and feasible policies that could both improve the autonomy and fiscal health of the district." I agree. I yield back.